Hey everyone, just here to let you know I have been enjoying the Arcanist class as a DPS so much to the point that I am now maining it, and with it being as simple as it looks, it's no wonder a lot of you have been reserved or perhaps doubtful or uncertain of how optimal or viable the Arcanist class may be for a variety of roles or scenarios, including dealing damage in endgame content. A lot of players seem to think that due to the low APM playstyle of the Arcanist and the fact that almost half of its total damage comes from the beam skill, at least showcased on Ray Dummy, it may not be so great. However, I think people are severely underestimating the burst and sustained damage potential of the class for actual content. In this guide, I'll be going over all of what you need to hit the max potential damage ceiling for the Arcanist class, and how to utilize it actually in content that may prove challenging initially for main to use depending on their experience level. It's recommended that for comfort and for damage optimization, you spec all 64 of your attribute points into stamina. We'll explain this why later in the video. Recommended races can include Altmer or High Elf, or Dunmer, Dark Elf, or Khajiit. Personally, I don't see any huge difference between the High Elf and Dark Elf races for the Arcanist after a lot of testing. I think there is some safety with the High Elf, especially for future patches, and also the fact that when you're channeling, you do get a 5% damage mitigation as you channel, while Dark Elf does have a slightly higher max stamina pool along with fire resistances. And for solo or 4-man content, Khajiit will also have an advantage due to the fact that most likely in 4-man content or solo content, there will be no extra source of critical damage provided. So Khajiit's critical damage passive will be nice. Recommended food, for the most part, will be a Bystat, health, and magic of food for pretty much everything. For parsing or for fights where you don't need that extra health, you can use parse foods such as Lavafoot soup and salt rice. Definitely will always recommend the Thief Mundus, especially for group content like Trials. There might be some instances where you may need to slot out Thief or Lover for solo overland content. Okay, I'll be explaining the itemization and skill setup for the Arcanist, and a big part of the reason why I'm loving the Arcanist is because it's so straightforward, it's so simple to the point where you don't have to do these, really significantly drastic different setups for both trash and boss fights like some other classes. You don't need to change a lot of your skills out, really, between trash and boss fights, which is a big plus, especially for console players who may not have access to, who of course don't have access to things like add-ons, like gear swap add-ons or skill swap add-ons, right? Like PC players do. So let's explain the gear setup here real quick. So we have one slime crawl, it's medium, divine stamina, so that's going to be it for basically every trait, every enchantment, every weight for your armor. One slime crawl. We have 5 coral riptide. Doesn't have to be perfected. It's nice if you do, but it doesn't have to be if you're just starting out. You have 5 coral riptide on your body. You have 1 deadly strike on one of your body armor slots, whichever it may be. And we have this mythic that is an absolute must if you want to play the Arcanist as a class. Now, I'll explain what I mean. So the Velothi Mage's Amulet is a must for Arcanist DPS if you want to push to the ceiling with your beam skill. And beam makes up almost half of your total damage done in any scenario. Or in some cases, most of your damage done. So the Velothi Mage's Amulet, essentially in conjunction with the Fate Carver Beam, allows you to get away with not light attack weaving. Because the beam, we had 3 Crux, will last about 5 GCDs or global cooldowns, basically 5 seconds. And during that time, you won't really have the time to apply Reliquin fast enough. You won't have the time to light attack because you can't light attack during the beam. So this mythic gives you minor force, gives you, while it does reduce your light and heavy attack damage by 99%, it does give you 15% unique damage done to monsters, bosses, and trash included. So when you're beaming, you're gonna need this. You'll wear it for trash. You'll wear it for literally every single boss instance. You'll wear it when you go visit your grandmother. You need this. unfortunately or fortunately, depending on your perspective. It'll be bloodthirsty with increased physical harm enchantments. I do recommend 3 increased physical harm enchantments. Although they do give both weapon and spell damage down, the extra 30 stamina recovery doesn't hurt, and actually it can be pretty nice if you can stack that with the rejuvenation slottable. But anyway, we do have Deadly Strikes on the front bar, and we do have Maelstrom Staff on the back bar. There's no real other good alternative to the Maelstrom Staff back bar for 2 reasons. One, it's great. And second, you don't want to use two-hander on the back bar, especially as a 64 stamina point Arcanist. You run out of sustain really fast, especially with a set that does already demand having a low max stamina pool active at all times. So you're kind of juggling low stamina pool along with a beam that costs stamina per second it channels. So you don't want a two-hander back bar. And that's really it. Now I'm going to talk about the alternatives for Deadly. You don't need to have Deadly front bar, because I've done a lot of testing content on the dummy with this. In fact, there's almost no significant difference in terms of single target numbers between using Deadly Strikes or Pillar of Nirn, which, a lot of you have used in the past. So you don't have to regrind the set or grind Deadly or whatever, or buy expensive jewelry for Deadly, or use chromium platings. Although, in some cases, Deadly may win out very slightly ahead, depending on the success of your rotation. We don't want to go with a Magic Arcanist spec or with light armor or whatever, or even have Bosse's Mania, because Bosse's Mania compared to Coral, the scaling is awful, and the sustain is a bit more difficult on a more Magicka-oriented Arcanist, which is why we are going with the Stark or Stamina Arcanist. Simply put, also in regards to Deadly versus Pillar of Nirn, in cases where you may still be learning the rotation or learning or performing mechanics during an actual fight that requires you to not channel the Exhausting Fate cover beam, Pillar of Nirn will win out. Whereas in the most ideal fights for the uninterrupted usage of your Exhausting Fate Carver skill, Deadly will win out. So think about this real quick. Think trash fights or boss fights where you don't have to roll dodge or block too much throughout the fight. Those fights, Deadly will win out. For fights where you may need to perform a lot of mechanics or roll dodge or block a lot more frequently than you would otherwise, then Pillar of Nirn as a proc set in terms of the damage proc, kind of filling the void of you not being able to beam in a certain instance or time frame, will win out versus Deadly, because Deadly depends on you channeling your beam. And I'll kind of go over as well what I'm doing in an actual trial hard mode fight for the new Ascending Edge trial that just came out with Necrom, with the Arcanist. And for trash, you can go with the following: 1 Slime Craw, 1 Velati Mage's Amulet, 5 Azure Blight on body, 5 Deadly Strikes on jewelry and front bar, and of course a Maelstrom Inferno on the back bar. Now, if you already have someone in your raid group running Azure Blight, or you don't have Azure Blight, you can just run Solzan's Torment instead on your body pieces, or just use Coral Riptide instead. So here, I've used both, and for Solzan, it's nice. Minor Slayer, more critical stat when you pick up the Essence. And it is nice, I think, when there's more space between each trash encounter. So let's say you kill trash pack A, and it takes you, let's say, 9 to 11 seconds to reach the next trash pack. Solzan's really nice. Coral, what if there's trash fights back to back? What about Sanctum Ophidia? What if you're always kind of out of stam, and you're always almost immediately engaging one trash after another? I would go with Coral. So really very flexible here. And again, another reason why I do like the Arcanist is because you can literally go Coral for everywhere and still be fine, still be doing really great damage. Skill-wise, on the front bar for a typical single target setup, we have Cephalaric's Flail as the main semi-spammable for generating those 3 Crux you need. It also applies a unique 5% increased damage to enemies for you, not for the group. Also is a nice burst heal, depending. And it's a nice long 20-second debuff as well. We have Barb Trap. This can be used as a passive Fighters Guild ability for more weapon and spell damage. It can also be used for the insane dot that it inflicts on targets. It is one of the strongest single target dots still in the game. Of course, you don't need to use it for the minor force because Velothi Erminia's Amulet gives you minor force. We have Exhausting Fate Carver. This is your bread and butter of the Arcanist. And you always want to cast a beam when you have 3 Crux. No more, no less. We have Camouflaged Hunter. This is just for giving us the Major Savaging Prophecy passive. And we have Deadly Cloak on the last skill slot for the front bar, since we are doing dual wield for most instances for single target. And we have Flawless Dawnbreaker, yet again for Fire's Guild passive. On the back bar, it's much more flexible here, and it's another reason why I love the Arcanist. We have Scalding Rune, which is just a stationary AoE dot, and of course a single target dot once triggered. And we have a Camouflaged Hunter, again, on the back bar. We don't really have something to put on here for fights where we don't need a self-heal or a utility skill for the rest of the group to use. We also have Elemental Blockade for the Maelstrom Inferno, and as a really strong AoE dot. We also do have Fulminating Rune, which is a targeted AoE on target. Really nice to cast. It just feels a lot better to me, at least, to cast this over Boneyard as a Necromancer. And we have a passive buff duration skill, Inspired Scholarship, which allows us to get away with, casting one less Ephaleric's Flail, as it does generate a Crux occasionally. And also on the back bar, we have our ultimate we'll be using in both trash and boss fights. Another reason why I love the Arcanist again is you will not see this back bar for the most part change. You won't really see the front bar really change. So for example, for trash, I would probably put in Mystic Orb for the sustain between trash packs in the place of Camouflaged Hunter, and I would probably put Proximity Detonation instead of Scouting Rune on the back bar. So it's just 2 skills slotted out. Meanwhile, on the front bar, I can just keep the same thing for trash. I don't need Whirling Blades. I don't need anything else. I just need Beam, and you're good to go. I'll kind of explain the rotation for everything here. And before I do explain the single target rotation, let me just show you my setups for Sanity's Edge, the newest trial for hard modes. So we have the trash setup, we have Proximity Det, Mystic Orb on the back bar with the typical Arcanist setup here. For boss 1, which requires a lot of roll dodging and moving and occasional blocking, you'll see that I do have a utility or heal ability on my back bar instead of Scouting Rune, just because there's a lot of moving targets and the boss tends to move around a bit as well, depending on what's going on. I do have Caltrips, which covers a wider AoE or area. Also cleaving the Wamasu, which does need to be cleaved down as well, or focused down, either way. And we do have Echoing Vigor, which is just a nice heal for myself and the group. And if I add something like Echoing Vigor or more utility skills to my back bar as, let's say, a Nightblade or something like that, or some of the other classes historically in ESO, I do lose out on potential damage. Whereas with Arcanist, it doesn't really affect me, which is, again, another reason why I love it. For Boss 2, which is the Chimera Hard mode, I do have a typical setup, just Scouting Rune with Vigor instead of a passive Fighter's Guild ability on the back bar. And nothing really changes again for Boss 3 hard mode in Sanity's Edge, which also requires you to roll dodge and block quite a bit depending on what's going on. So yeah, that's really it. For champion points, before we get moving on to rotations, we do have Warfare slottables. So Warfare slottables are pretty straightforward because, remember, we're talking about a class that's using all medium armor slots. So you don't need... You have minor force at all times. And with the presence of Elemental Catalyst in the trial group, it basically means you don't need to slot champion point slottables such as Backstabber or Fighting Finesse to get to the 125% crit damage cap. Instead, since we are focusing on the damage of Exhausting Fate Carver, the beam skill, since it's AoE based and it's a damage over time effect, and it can be timed easily with your ultimate on off-balance targets, the Thaumaturge, Biting Aura, and Exploiter slottables are perfect for the Arcanist. Furthermore, since the beam is not a single target skill, you don't need Deadly Aim or Master at Arms. In fact, Wrathful Strikes will be much more useful than Deadly Aim or Master at Arms, as the beam isn't a single direct damage hit base skill either. And due to Exhausting Fate Cover's demand for stamina cost, as it channels, combined with the fact that you are running Coral Riptide that also demands a low running stamina pool, I highly recommend that you use the Expert Evasion and Slippery Slottables in the Fitness tree alongside Fortified and Balanced Vitality when running actual content. Rejuvenation can obviously replace one of the two Slottables I mentioned just now, Expert Evasion and Slippery on a dummy Parse with Bystat Food. Just a note here that you can pre-buff 3 Crux before a fight is initiated, so you can use a fully buffed 3 Crux Exhausting Fate Carver very early into your rotation, which means bigger DPS at the start. Since you are utilizing Coral Riptide for essentially almost every instance, you need to make sure that you start at around 30 to 35% of your maximum stamina pool. Stay about 4 to 5 meters away from your target as you start your opening rotation. An opening rotation on a target is as follows: cast Inspired Scholarship, bar swap and use Deadly Cloak, bar swap again and use Scalding Rune. Approach the target as you bar swap from Scalding Rune to Barb Trap. Bar swap and light attack weave into a Blockade of Fire. Bar swap yet again and apply Zephyrot's Flail to the target. Bar swap immediately after that and apply Fulminating Rune to the target. Cast the Languid Eye ultimate, then bar swap, and then finally cast your beam. That sounds like a lot of work. And just note that you can kind of cut out some light attacks if you really want to speed this basically opening rotation up, since you are doing 99% less light attack damage anyway. After your initial Exhausting Fate Carver goes off, you should be able to cast 2 Zephyrot's Flails immediately after that and cast a second fully buffed Exhausting Fate Carver as your backbar dots run out, which you shouldn't panic about. At this point in the rotation, you just try to keep your stamina as low and manageable as possible while you keep up your damage over time effects as best as possible all the way through the execute threshold as well. It's important to try to line up your Languid Eye with Exhausting Fate Carver when So this is technically an easier rotation, just cutting out Scalding Rune on the back bar. We are essentially doing the exact same opening rotation, minus the Scalding Rune. And you'll notice that without another GC to cast on the back bar, it's just easier to keep up the other dots as well in conjunction with this rotation. And that's pretty much it. Nothing really changes with this, apart from just cutting out one skill. So I'm going to do an overview of actual content. This is Exarchonic Assaila in Veteran Settings Edge on the hard mode. Requires a bit of movement, good positioning, and I'll kind of explain why I'm going play by play. Here at this point, we're focusing the Wamasu. I'm trying to position myself in such a way where my beam is hitting the boss and the Wamasu. At this point in time, as I'm beaming, I'm backing up away from the boss and the Wamasu, knowing that they are going to charge probably towards me, or there's going to be an AoE that goes off that might potentially interrupt my beam. Here, I just kind of monkey out, and I guess I just don't look at the Wamasu, and I die. So yeah, just don't be greedy for those beams, right? I get up, and I keep parsing the Wamasu at this point, and try to include the boss, and I'm beaming and beaming. And you notice here that I'm not really keeping on my back bar dots, but it doesn't really matter because beam just kind of makes up for it at this point in time. We're not really focusing the boss too heavily. The boss cleave is secondary, and at this point, as we kill the Wamasu, I beam into the boss. We're stacking up, and I'm putting all my back bar dots down, and we're beaming with 3 Crocs up. Now, one mistake I did make here as a DPS is I didn't beam as my ultimate went out. I beamed after I cast my sometime after my ultimate. Ideally, you want to beam with your ultimate rather than beaming after your ultimate, if that makes sense. But even despite the mistake, I'm still catching up to the top parser in the group. And here we're instructed to focus the Wamasu. As you can see, I'm still adjusting and positioning myself to where I can potentially hit both the boss and the Wamasu. This is going to be a recurring theme when you guys are playing the Arcanist in other trials. You'll notice that maybe, depending on how many Arcanist DPS are in group, the tanks may need to readjust the boss positioning. I'm thinking Refabrication Committee in VHOF, where you can hit all three of them most definitely in a line, rather than in a crowd of three, if that makes sense. Here, again, I'm always keeping... I don't know what I did there. I don't know why I escaped. I think I just had a tap targeted. Oh, well, we're just not doing anything. We're just holding DPS. Right. My monkey parse brain forgot about that. So here I'm just doing mechanics in terms of just killing the horrors, which need to be killed in order for us to kill those archers that are always hitting us and channeling. I'm making sure I dot up the other ghosts. I don't want to just focus on my mechanic. I want to help the other three members doing the same thing as me finish at roughly the same time I am finishing my ghost. And here I'm using my beam effectively to where I can hit two ghosts first and then another ghost behind me. This beam is really, really nice if you are aware of your situation. And in some ways, another big thing I didn't bring up earlier in the video is I think the Arcanist with its low APM playstyle and the fact that beam is 5 GCDs plus is really nice for people trying to learn new things and trying to learn new mechanics. Here we put down basically damage here with the beam. Now we're top parsing. But yeah, that's one thing I wanted to mention because I think people take that for granted a lot, especially with some of the other ESO classes for DPSing. People tend to start focusing on their skill bar more often than what's going on around them. I think the Arcanist with its low APM playstyle definitely helps fix that or addresses that. It certainly did for me when I'm doing this new trial on PTS and on live. I can just kind of look around. As you can see, I'm just like looking around what's going on over there while I'm doing DPS with the beam over here. And here we're going to position ourselves. We canceled out a beam just because we didn't want to risk maybe messing up other people's positioning with the ice cage. And also the Wamasu charger was coming, so just in case we have to move out. I believe I am not wearing celerity. Or rather, I don't have the celerity slottable equipped, so when I'm beaming, I am moving a little slower. One tip I do have for any Arcanist DPS out there is to move sideways, like I've been doing in this video. Don't move backwards to try to get out of things, move sideways. This is something you'll notice in older trials like Hellrot Citadel, Sanctum Ophidia with World Shapers, that if you move backwards, your hitbox actually lingers for a little bit longer than when you would move out of an AoE sideways. Which is why in this video I'm moving sideways quite a bit when I'm beaming, backing up if I know there's nothing coming my way and in anticipation of me letting this 5-second channel go off on the boss. Here we're holding our DPS and ice cages are going out. We're still waiting, holding DPS, making sure everyone's finished their mechanic. I'm going to pop up some Echoing Vigor to help the healers. Not that they need it. And here, we're going to restart rotation, put the wall down, Fulminating Rune, Cephalodrix Flail debuff on the boss. I'm going to wait and hold on to the beam. Here, a Wamasu has spawned, and I'm going to beam the Wamasu. At this point, the Rayleigh calls out, hey, we need to focus the Wamasu, not the boss. So I don't even really adjust myself to cleave the boss, even though I'm positioning myself here too, just out of habit. And here we're just beaming the Wamasu. And you can notice that I'm trying to keep up my dots as best as possible, and there will be times where I just kind of let some dots go, but it's more than made up for the fact that in content, not the dummy, in actual content, the beam is going to be quite significant over maybe missing out a few seconds on a dot or whatever. And we're still going to be doing incredible amount of damage. And here, we've lined up everything. We have the cloak up. We don't have the barb trap down, unfortunately, due to the shrapnel AoE. We're going to debuff again. Cast another Cephalodrix Flail into a beam here soon. Going to make sure we are positioning ourselves correctly outside of the boss AoE. As I'm beaming, I'm moving backwards, looking around where the Wamasus are going. At this point, the boss is going to die. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Thanks for watching the video. If you have any questions, you can join the ESU Discord or ask down in the comments below. Thanks for watching.